Oh yeah, he's also online, yeah.
Good afternoon. Welcome back for this women-only panel. Actually, we have two gentlemen online. Well, thank you for being with us. The topic of this session will be on regional economic cooperation in the Western Balkans. The title is, Where Do We Stand? Our aim is to come together with ideas on, where do you want to go and how do we get there? I think the how is also the most difficult part, but also the most important one. I'm Valbona Zeneli, the chair of strategic initiatives at the George C. Marshall European Center for Security Studies. And I'm really honored and pleased to be back here. It's great. It's been 2 wonderful days. And I thank very much the organizers, but also all of you for your great insights. In this panel, we have Mr. Alexander Wallau. He is the head of Division 212 in the bilateral relations to the countries of Central, Southeastern, and Eastern Europe, also Southern Caucasus and Central Asia at the German Federal Chancellery in Berlin. Thank you, Mr. Wallau, for being with us. Ms. Pranvera Kastrati, she is the Common Regional Market Coordinator at the Regional Cooperation Council. Mr. Nenad Djurdjevic, he is the advisor to the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Belgrade, Serbia. Welcome. Ms. Jelica Minić, the president of the European Movement in Serbia, Belgrade. And also Professor Silvana Mojsovska. She is a professor at the Institute of Economics at the Cyril and Methodius University in Skopje. So thank you all for being with us. As you see, I did not go through the bios because I think all of you know them. They have been part of this network for a very long time. And so there's so much experience, I think, in this panel. When the Berlin process started back in 2014, actually, 2 of the 4 goals of the Berlin process relate to economic development. And that is enhancing regional economic cooperation and also laying the foundations for sustainable economic growth. As we all know, it's all about the economics. And so also in the recommendations that we had, we did not have recommendations on regional economic integration, and I think we'll come up with some. Because everything that we have discussed, I think, leads to that. The last panel will be on EU integration, which is the final goal. When you ask people in the Western Balkans, and that was done from Regional Cooperation Council just a couple of months ago, almost 50% of them, so 47% of them, mentioned as the main security challenge, economic situation. The second most important, by 40% almost, it's unemployment related. Corruption, we discussed about that in the previous panel, for almost 30% of the citizens in the region. And also a new concern that came up this year, but has been in discussion for a long time, which is brain drain. Even more concerning, if you ask people in the region, young people, almost 70% of them want to emigrate. So these are the main security challenges. Economic convergence with the West, with Western European countries, has stalled, unfortunately. There have been 3 deep recessions in the region since 2008, and that has made the conversion really very difficult when the income per capita on average in the region is only 15% of the average of the European Union. And that explains many of the challenges that we have been discussing over the last 2 days. It will need 50 to 75 years for citizens in the region to catch up economically with the partners, with the countries in the EU. So I'd like to start with you, Mr. Wallau. We know that the Berlin process, from the very beginning, the goal was to close this economic and institutional gap that exists with the Western European countries. So this has been crucial not only for the Berlin process, but also for the integration more in a bigger context. So what lies ahead for the region in terms of economic integration? What will be new, if you can tell us something, in the Berlin process? And what will be the focus? But then I also have another point, and I hope you can make that in 5 minutes, describe, and that will be what are the measures for transparency and accountability? How are leaders in Berlin, but also, the European leaders more in large, how are they going to keep the leaders of the Balkans, Western Balkans, accountable for the commitments that they make?
Yes, well, thank you and good afternoon from me here, also in Berlin, and my apologies for not being able to join you also in person, and also with an attempt to diversify the panel, at least the one that is in presence there. But we are in the me and my team are in the final stages of putting the finishing touches on tomorrow's summit. So. Indeed, we are quite busy here still, and nevertheless, I thought it would be a good opportunity to inform you on where we stand and what we have in store, and perhaps also look on the questions you raised. I mean, 5 minutes is not enough for that, but and I have to also admit that I am a bit of a superstitious person, so I still will be a bit cautious, and I don't want to jump the gun, but I do want to underline that what is in store for regional economic cooperation, I'd say we are on the brink of some very good news. You may have all followed the foreign ministers ministerial a few days ago, and we are looking forward to being able to open a new chapter tomorrow at the summit by the signing of 3 agreements under for the common regional market, which were negotiated by the RCC. These 3 agreements will lead to the potential of untapping the full economic power that the regional common market has. But I also want to look back on what we've already achieved in the Berlin process regarding economic development and integration. I mean, you have seen rails and roadways have been built. 2020, we saw the introduction of green lanes, and last year the abolishment of roaming charges. These things always sound very technical, but in the end they are big economic leaps, because they make day-to-day life easier and they make interconnection easier. And in the end, this is what economic and regional cooperation is all about. So if all goes well, tomorrow we will see the signing of 3 agreements on ID card free travel, as well as the recognition of professional qualifications and diplomas. So 3 key agreements in the mobility sector, which will enable citizens of the Western Balkan 6 to freely travel, but also to take up work qualifications in the region. And in the end, these are elements that also make up the EU internal market. And the more the regional common market moves closer to the EU common market, the more not only economic potential is there, but the more benefit is there, can be untapped for all. So these are indeed, I have to say, major breakthroughs when this is tomorrow signed. The proof of the matter will then lie in implementation, as is always the case, but I'd say that they're under the auspices of RCC, and also in the end, the eyes of the region, Europe, and of the world are looking on this summit and on the implementation of these agreements. This, in turn, should already be accountability, be an element of accountability. There's another aspect that we are looking at, which also sort of builds on security issues, which is energy, which also feeds into the whole broader economic picture on the one hand, but also the geopolitical one as well. We see also in the energy field, in particular electricity, huge potential for cooperation among the Western Balkan 6 to use electricity grids, but also to make sure that the interconnectors between the Western Balkan 6, but also to the European Union, are enhanced. And this, in the end, will make it easier for energy to flow freely, but also to decrease dependencies some energy providers, something that we in Germany have experienced in the last few months since against the backdrop of the Russian aggression in Ukraine. And simply the goal of being able to diversify energy sources is a huge step in order to foster resilience and to again enhance regional cooperation. I think I'll stop there. Regarding your last question on what can be done to ensure accountability and that the leaders of the Western Balkans commit to the engagements that they have done. I'd have to say, at least what the Chancellor has done, Chancellor Scholz, since taking up office, is to underline that the EU also has to deliver on the accession processes. We have there reason to believe that a new chapter has been opened. In the end, it's all about accountability, it's about reforms, it's about following through on reforms. And at least I, for one, am very confident that with the new dynamics that are already palpable in the region and which we also hope to inject in tomorrow's summit, things are looking very good. So I'll stop there and looking forward to further discussions and questions.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the good news. So I hope you'll get some insights from our panel in terms of recommendations that you could bring up also tomorrow. I have another question, but we'll come in the second round for you later on. Pranvera, I would like to ask you from the Regional Cooperation Council perspective. What are some of the successes that have been achieved? Mr. Wallau mentioned some of them. What are the challenges, but also what are your main priorities? If we say like the 3 main priorities for the next year to come in terms of fostering more regional economic cooperation. And please try also to quantify, because we talk a lot about these issues, but we need also in terms of communication with the public, we need to bring up numbers out there. We need to show them what has been done.
Thank you. Indeed, communicating the results is where you start to build confidence that you are delivering. And I believe that Berlin process and common regional market is delivering, of course, with all, let's say, all the hurdles in the process, and in some moments with delays, in some others much more faster. But of course, it's delivering. And I think that for us in the RCC, but not just in the RCC, but in the region, the accountability of what our citizens believe and think is what makes us driving the agenda. So just to quantify a bit, the Balkan Barometer 2022 says that 76% of our citizens and 69% of our businesses believe that the regional cooperation is the response for a better political, economic, and security in the Western Balkans. And while having that in mind, we have pushed the implementation of many agendas within the common regional market. Green lanes were mentioned. Indeed, this came as a response to COVID and from a response to an unpredicted situation. Now it has become a reality and it has become a daily practice, but it didn't stop there. We had initially the green lanes within the Western Balkans. Now we are going a step further and we are extending this to the EU, which will make the life for businesses easier and faster movement of goods throughout the region and beyond. Roaming was also mentioned, and I think that with the introduction of Roam Like at Home from 1st July last year, I think that we brought connectivity of people, so people-to-people connectivity in the region closer and more visible. Just to give some figures, after the entry into force of the Roam Like at Home regime, the number of roaming users in the Western Balkans doubled. And the use of data while roaming in some of the economies was up to 500% increase, which means that it is producing results and it is producing very good ones. And this is not something that again will stop. It will be again part of the regional cooperation and efforts to reduce the roaming charges with EU. This is our next objective and our next goal. And I hope that soon we'll have another good news for the citizens of the Western Balkans, but not only. also for the EU citizens, whenever they come in the region, they don't need to turn off their mobile data because the bill is very high. In addition to that, the 3 agreements have been, let's say, announced as a breakthrough, and we are really all looking forward to tomorrow's signing. But we believe that with the problems and the concerns of the brain drain, as you said, the figure is very worrisome, but we in RCC, we do not shy away of the problems, because for us, knowing the problem means we know how to address it and how to work all together about it. And with these 3 mobility agreements, we are confident that it will also improve the mobility of professionals, and also it will facilitate different works and educational, let's say, impetus to less costly for the region. So academic qualification, for instance, or higher education recognition, currently takes months for a recognition. According to the agreement, it will take not more than 14 days. Currently, we pay 400 to 500 euros for a recognition process. With the agreement, it will cost 0. So these are results that, in a way, build confidence to the region that this process delivers. But it is important to highlight that it delivers when political will is there, and where citizens are at the main line of speaking of the politicians, and whenever this brings results for them. There are many other agendas that are flourishing as part of the common regional market in general, but I would just try to say 3 challenges, so for me to conclude that. I think that the twin transition, digital and green transition, is one of the challenges that we have in the region, and we already see this as a policy that should be mainstreamed throughout all policy agendas. The second one is how to make our region a boat where it's lovely to stay, and not a boat from where you want to live. And in other words, this means to have a better environment for our citizens, quality of life, less barriers in communicating among us, and of course, let's say, an increased and strengthened connectivity between all people. And third, reconciliation, which for us in the regional cooperation means a lot in achieving and in getting the results, because many of the hurdles of the past are time after time coming from political to technical, and they are switching one to the other and creating delays. So this would be for me a concluding part for the first round of questions.
Well, thank you very much. And actually, you know, for in the EU integration process, the economic integration has been always the main pillar, or one of the main pillars that will bring also reconciliation in the region. Nenad, I will ask you a question from the business perspective. So we're talking about the region. At the end of the day, the total market of the Western Balkans is about $130 billion, which is only 1% of the European Union market. It attracts less than 0.2% of the foreign direct investment. When we are in a strategic, position, geographical position, next to the European Union, and the European Union countries are not only, one of the biggest investors in the global economy, but also they attract most of the investments from the global investors. So we know, Nenad, that things have changed since the times of CEFTA. There has been a reduction of the tariffs among, for the intra-regional trade. However, we know that the burden now is a lot in the non-tariff barriers. So from the business perspective, what should the governments do to create a friendly business environment where companies will trade more, inside the region, but also invest more? So it's not only about trade, because we focus on trade. The most important element, I think, is investment, because that is the most sustainable one. So from the business community, what are your perspectives?
Well, thanks for the question. Hello to the audience. Good afternoon to everyone from Belgrade. I'm happy to be at this panel. And on your concrete question, I'll try to give you a concrete answer. And what the government should do, I think the government should completely change the current paradigm of cooperation. Also among themselves, and also the paradigm of cooperation between the Western Balkans and the EU. All the figures that you added, that you mentioned, I will add one more, that actually we can see that a continuous decrease of intra-regional cooperation or economic exchange. So there is a less exchange between the countries of the Western Balkans in the past years than it used to be before. So governments, or how to say, one can say that these economies are more linked to the production chains of value chains that are linked to the developed countries of the European Union. Nevertheless, the sustainable economic model need to look for a bigger intra-regional economic cooperation, exchange, investment, and so on and so forth. So how to achieve this? It's a big question. I think, as I said, first thing is that the current system or current reality of cooperation or communication in the Western Balkans didn't show or didn't give sufficient results. If we also see the Berlin process that was initiated to foster and to give an impetus to this regional cooperation, I think that it gave also pretty modest results. I really support and cherish all the achievements in the area of the free roaming, and I really am thankful to the German government and the partners for, how to say, helping for the 3 agreements to be accepted and adopted and be tomorrow formally signed. However, bearing in mind the realities of Europe, the turn of the era, which I think it's one word that in Germany is very much after the February 24th, I think we should also look for the turn of the era in the Western Balkans in respect to regional cooperation. All the agreements that are currently in place, all the initiatives that have been started from the Common Regional Market Action Plan, CEFTA, which is a kind of umbrella agreement for trade, Open Balkan initiatives, that is all initiatives that we as a chamber, as a chambers, as a business community do support. We support everything that really the government showed any commitment for better cooperation, for removing the barriers, for deepening the cooperation, for creating a common regional market, but fully common regional market, not the facilitation of common regional market. So we believe that now, fortunately and unfortunately for this, because there is this really disastrous war in Ukraine that is going on because of the invasion of Russia, all of us need to look and to work within the new paradigm and to see how to create institutions within the region that can give an answer to all these needs, from energy cooperation to food security cooperation and all the rest, which is also part of the common regional market. And for this, we believe that we have to talk about different or new initiatives that can come after the tomorrow summit. Namely, we think that more responsibility need to be given to the local governments, regional governments, in adopting and implementing the regional economic cooperation agenda, that they should be the responsible key players and to implementing this agenda, that all other institutions that are created within the Berlin process can and should provide expert support, technical support, know-how, for instance, how the European Union has been created from European Economic Association to single market, other known recipes. But the main responsibility should be on the local governments that should take a serious part in this and show that are they willing to take responsibility or not. That is the first thing. And the second thing, we definitely believe, and we are sharing this, I believe also with our colleagues from Ukraine, that turn of the era also in this respect would be or should be ability for the Western Balkans to have an access to the EU single market and to have a new agreement with the EU in this respect, of course, based on the merit and the results that each country in the Western Balkans show. I think that this kind of change would actually distribute responsibility much more on the local stakeholders, at the same time having a very credible end result of this process. And this, we should state, should be just one step towards full-fledged EU integration. But we are aware that because of the current situation in the European Union, in the process of enlargement, the full-fledged EU integration for the Western Balkans and also for Ukraine and Moldova is not something which we can speak about in a foreseeable future. But membership in the single market will show really concrete benefit for the citizens, for the companies, for the EU companies, and can really help transforming the region for good. And if you see what are the clusters that will enable or the govern single market access to the EU, those clusters also are taking into consideration the rule of law as well. So this is something which I think the day after tomorrow, all of us, including Germany, who was an initiator of the Berlin process, should think about. And I believe that also disputes, or use this word, moderate word, between Serbia and Kosovo, maybe could be better looked upon if there is a regional perspective of it, and if there is a perspective of the membership of the single market for all the region. This is something which we as a chamber and few chambers of the region are strongly advocating. We are continuing to do that. So I think this is some of the thoughts that maybe will give some positive for the new change in respect to the regional economic cooperation within the Western Balkans, and then the communication between the EU and the Western Balkans. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Nenad. Thank you for your insights and suggestions. And it's really very important that once the countries have achieved the standards as part of the fundamentals cluster and the economic cluster, it's important that they become part of the single market, but also have more access to EU budgets, because that will speed up, the convergence process with the other EU countries. Jelica, so what should we do, or how should we put the regional economic integration in a much broader context? And you have been writing and working a lot on this topic. So let me ask you this: is there a vision of common economic market in the Western Balkans? What do we need to do to foster that? And when I mentioned that, how can we put that in a much broader context, is that, how do we aim to advancing human capital? How do we aim at bringing, advancing circular migration, so bringing people back in the region? So what are your thoughts?
Well, I would say that at the beginning, when the regional economic area was launched in Trieste, everybody was against that, commenting that this is a substitute for European integration, that we want to join European Union, not to develop a regional market. Then the dynamics, of course, we know how it happened. The open Balkans appeared, joining like-minded countries. We are now open Balkans: Albania, Macedonia, Serbia, Albania, Serbia. It happened like that. So at the end, thanks to Open Balkans, now everybody accepted common regional market. Now common regional market is fully accepted because it's a better variant. It's inclusive. It has a more complex agenda, what is very important. Common Regional Market also launched recently this research and innovation roadmap.
Yes.
This is a very important direction. It's going above four freedoms. But everybody was taking even Open Balkans, was taking everything that was prepared in different regional initiatives, first of all in the regional cooperation councils, or ideas or documents, even the 3 documents that are going to be adopted tomorrow. In fact, they were prepared in the Regional Cooperation Council, but also adopted through the Open Balkans. So we have parallel tracks. It is not easy to handle this situation, but on the other side, it works. What is the future? I personally believe there will be this match. In this match, the winner will be common regional market. But on the other side, Open Balkans bought the time. Regional Cooperation Council and other regional initiatives had a lot of problems because of relations between Serbia and Kosovo. And many good initiatives were blocked, in fact. It was not possible to sign any agreement of this size, all 6 stakeholders. So it happened now, and I think this is the pressure of the situation, the war in Ukraine. We have a different context now of regional cooperation. Not only the war in Ukraine, we had COVID that changed a lot. We had green lanes thanks to COVID. Then we had, this year, we had also idea of European political community launched, which has some common elements like new methodology for Western Balkan countries. And this is not only, this is the single market, but also the idea of sectoral integration, merit-based sectoral integration offer for the Western Balkan countries, that those who made appropriate advance in specific sectors would have access to even EU institutions as observers to follow the process. And I think it's very important to involve Western Balkan countries in as many as possible EU institutions, to be there, to follow the processes and to learn. Be observers, but have a chance to learn how to operate, how the decision making is done, how the concepts have been developed. This is a very important learning process. We also have an economic and investment plan. There's so many elements on the table, and we have to somehow take whatever we can from that offer. It's a serious offer. We always complain, but on the other side, we have to focus ourselves to use the opportunities in the best possible way. And in the recommendations given in this booklet, we can find recommendations for civil society in the region, that civil society should make this social pressure to get our countries together, to approach our governments, to work more closely, to develop networks of the civil society, to make a joint advocacy, because when we speak with one voice, it is much better assessed. Then it seems that we really have a vision. And finally, I was very glad reading that Mrs. Baerbock said to Mrs. Malinda Bregu that the Regional Cooperation Council is the major force of the Berlin process. It is so rarely that since the Berlin process was established, that the work of regional initiatives was praised in such a way. It's not only Regional Cooperation Council, we have CEFTA, Transport Community, many other initiatives that were involved. All of them did really a great work, and they were always stopped and blocked by political processes. So the main problem is in political processes. If we expect this project of regional cooperation to be successful, it has to gather those who have the same interests, those who develop certain level of trust, mutual trust. This is a big problem. Those who are really committed, and those who are able to provide external support. If these four conditions are fulfilled, then we are on the safe road.
Well, thank you, Jelica. I think there's been no shortage of signing initiatives in the Western Balkans in the last 30 years. So the main question that we have been discussing over and over again is implementation, and how we keep governments accountable for implementation. That's the role of civil society. So that's why we are here together. I'll go to you, Silvana. You are a scholar that have been working for a very long time in studying, the different initiatives. So could you give us a picture of the regional initiatives and their impact in the region, in the Western Balkans? And what are your recommendations as a scholar? And being a professor, maybe if you can mention something about the importance of promoting linkages between academia, industry, and governments in the Western Balkans.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. Greetings to all. And we've heard many notions about the recent developments in the regional cooperation of the Balkans, but it's an old topic. In 2001, the ministries of our Western Balkan countries dealing with foreign affairs and trade decided to sign the bilateral trade agreements. And that's how CEFTA, the initiation of CEFTA started. The CEFTA was then signed in 2006. The CEFTA, there is a habit to have a CEFTA week that is held every year in the country that is holding the presidency. In 2016, it was in Belgrade, I remember, and for the first time, it was a Serbian minister saying that CEFTA is disappointing. It did not deliver the results. I will now tell you the data, why it was said like that, and why it is actually sometimes important to talk very openly about that. In 2010, CEFTA was, intra-CEFTA export in the region was around 4.8 billion euros, and CEFTA import was a bit less. But it's more important to say how was that in relative terms. At that time, in 2010, around 90% of the export was done in the region, and 9% of the import was done within the region as well. In 2017, we had a situation that only 16% of the export was done in the region, and now, in 2021, we had only 13.8% of the export of the region done in the CEFTA. In absolute terms, the export and import increased. So if we compare 2010, when it was like 4.8 billion euros the export, in 2021 it was around 6 billion euros. But if we compare the increase of the trade in the region, then we have another picture. In 2017, it was like 30 billion, all export from the region, and 5 years later, it was 43. So we can see an extreme growth of the trade of the region, but that was not CEFTA related. However, after this famous CEFTA week, I would say in 2016, some things have started to move. And the initiatives that we are talking now that have provided some success were actually initiated then. And CEFTA was dealing more to signing protocols related to trade in services, protocol on trade facilitation or removal of the non-tariff barriers. And then there was also a discussion about this mutual recognition of some of the professional diplomas in certain areas, and so on and so on and so on. In the meantime, in 2017, there was the initiatives for regional economic area. And that initiative, as Jelica mentioned very well, it lived in terms of politics, but it didn't live operationally until the Open Balkan Initiative was launched as an internal initiative of the countries. So what was done now, it's actually, I can see there is a lot of progress, especially in the area of digital connection of the countries, the fourth pillar of this regional economic area, or now the common market. And I'm not going to go into a professor explanation about area and market and so on, but I must say that now the ambition of the market is actually much deeper integration than it was envisaged first. That is probably a response to the Open Balkan Initiative, which is good, but we could not do that without support. When I say support, we have to have in mind that all these regional initiatives absorb a lot of resources of the countries, and not always that we have resources. When it comes now to the first pillar of the common market, which is related to the trade, and it's most developed, I've already said the data about the export and import. But the companies are really struggling with non-tariff measures and trade facilitation barriers. Almost every year or every 2 years, there is an empirical research done and funded by the European Union of the companies, and they express what are the barriers they face. The barriers they reported last year were more or less the same in all the Western Balkan countries. And the main one is that the countries mutually do not recognize the certificates that are needed on the process of export or import of certain goods. And here we have as a major obstacle the sanitary and phytosanitary agreement. Serbia has been the main exporter in the region and also an importer, as it's a large economy. And for example, North Macedonia and Bosnia are second and third. These two countries, North Macedonia and Serbia, have an agreement for mutual recognition of these certificates since 2016. So if you ask the business people, they would say, why are you asking us all the time these questions? We are doing these empirical reports and we are sending them to the government, but we don't see any improvement. So the first recommendation, all these studies and a really empirical-based analysis should somehow reach the government and be implemented into practice. Because business is choosing either it's going to work with some other partner from some other country if it's less costly and it's more time effective. In this case, it's the European Union. Then, when we talk about the investment in general is not big, but it's important in terms of this cooperation. and actually showing that this regional cooperation is not so huge, because these companies, foreign direct investors, they actually export to the European Union. So we have a situation when the trade in the region, as the first pillar, is actually, there is a lot of trade potential, but it takes for the policies to be aligned and for more actions on the spot to ease the life of the business in order to see proper benefits. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Silvana. There's so much, here also to digest in terms of recommendations, and I already see the sign that we only have 15 minutes left, and I have so many questions. But I'd like to go to Alexander for a quick question. We're in Berlin, Alexander, so my question is very simple. Are we going to see a Zeitenwende in the Western Balkans? How can we foster economic development there, not just for regional economic integration, but to bring it closer to the EU in an area of strategic competition, but also considering the rise of Chinese interests in the region for strategic competition?
Well, I mean, Zeitenwende is probably what is needed in so many sectors, and I mean, if we look at what Zeitenwende means, that events after, or that everything after a certain event is completely different to what we have known and seen before. I would agree that that Zeitenwende is necessary, and at least as being someone who has been following the Berlin process now over this and last summit, I have to say that we have already made a lot of progress, and I mean, Zeitenwende also requires that the foundations are there, and at least this is something we are working on. I would agree that further impulses are necessary for the process to fill it with life and with dynamics, and that's something which I hope we will be able to achieve tomorrow. Because if I look back at the last year, the Zeitenwende and the backdrop to which we are doing all this has changed dramatically, and one of the elements which some put very carefully about disputes between Kosovo and Serbia, we find that this is something that is harmful for the region, and it should be covered as quickly as possible to make progress there. Against the backdrop of the geopolitical situation that we have, the region and Europe have to move closer together, and the region as a whole has to move closer together. So, and there we are working on that as well. I think also filling the Kosovo, the Pristina-Belgrade dialogue with new life is something that is beneficial not only for Serbia and Kosovo, but also for the region as such. This is in the end what has blocked the 3 agreements over the last 12 months. We are indeed can be proud that we have somehow managed to contain the problem in a way that we can move forward on the agreements. These are little steps. These are not. It's not the big Zeitenwende, but it is something that should not be belittled as either. I think these are the elements that we have to build on.
Well,
Thanks.
thank you. I think it's very important that after 30 years, we move from seeing the region for its problems and making the region part of the transatlantic solutions, part of European and transatlantic solutions. So from this perspective, when I mentioned Zeitenwende, it's like, how can we look that the regional market contributes to European strategic autonomy too, when it comes to energy, when it comes to nearshoring or ally shoring, how we want to call it. So I think that is important, that we are part of solutions. I have 2 quick questions, and I'll throw those in the panel. Should we also take questions from the audience? Okay, so I would like to go back to Pranvera regarding the issue of migration and brain drain, but also human capital. So we're seeing that in terms of percentage, there are a large number of population is leaving the region, and because of institutional and income gaps that exist. But in the long term, this is creating mismatches between what are the available skills and what will be needed for new industries there. So what can we do, also in the framework of the Berlin process and other regional initiatives, to foster circular migration?
Well, there might be different ways of addressing it, but I think that we should start from a better cooperation between academia and private sector to do upskilling within the region, in particular on those sectors that are needed, where skills are still lacking in the market. In addition to this, I guess that dedicated traineeship and mentorship to the youngsters, to bring them closer to the market needs and labor market demand, would also help to bring hope that in the region they might find let's say, different employment opportunities. And while combining this with also the let's say, adequate implementation of the agreements that we are now hoping tomorrow to see the signing, and make the implementation a reality where the mobility of skills in the region is strengthened. I guess that through this, we are bringing more benefits to what the market needs are and what the business needs are in this regard. Combining the policies, in particular to research and innovation, and through the dedicated policy reforms in the education system, I think that brain drain and migration is also to be seen in the perspective of economic cost that this has for the economies. And just to say one very recent figure from the German Marshall Fund, that high tendency of the brain drain in the region would cost the region's economy around 3 billion of yearly GDP growth. And also the cost that this movement of the youngsters abroad, not in the region, is also bringing a lot of economic losses to the education system. So I guess more investment in the education, but with an approach that the education is not seen only as one step for you to complete your professional career, but as a starting point for you to start looking for a job and be placed in the market where your skills are, let's say, necessary. I think this should be the way out of trying to close the gap and the mismatch between the demand and the offer for skills in the region.
Absolutely, and that will increase the competitiveness of the region. Silvana, Jelica, do you have any comments on this specific issue? Quick points, or we can move to the other?
On human capital.
On human capital.
Well, I think this dimension of innovation,
Yeah,
which is also stressed by the Regional Cooperation Council and the competition that is organized among young entrepreneurs. And I think a lot should be done there, because there is a capacity in the region still, although there is a huge brain drain. And there is an interest for smart specialization in the region, but it means decentralization, much greater role of local communities in Serbia, of regions. There are huge regional differences. We have to mobilize different energies that do exist in our societies through decentralization process, because there are a lot of ideas of what should be done, but it's not possible with systems that are highly, highly centralized.
Mm-hmm. And so maybe also more funds from the European Union, or also in the framework of the Berlin process, to increase those absorptive capacities, both for young people, but also for, for businesses in that perspective. And I'd like to ask Nenad, maybe if you can explain in 1 minute, what do you see as challenges also when it comes to human capital and skills that are needed for the industries of the future and the present?
Oh, well, political stability and predictability is the same as for the investments. You need to have the long-term political predictability and the stability to know how to say, plan your economic, social, and other development. You need to, create auspices that not only geographically to be part of the Europe, but also to be in a foreseeable future part of the European Union, and also at the same time to create possibilities and jobs and educational capacities in the region, So to avoid, or as much as possible, to hamper brain drain to the European Union. So it's a very complex thing. Now we have just a brain drain without any control. We also have some, brain drain from Russia coming to the region and to Serbia due to the war in Ukraine. But what we can do is really to have this kind of basic pillars of our development. And I would just refer to one of the panelists who said, everything was okay with the Berlin process and all the regional cooperation, but was stopped by the political processes. So nothing is okay then. If the political process can stop it, then nothing is okay, because we have to see how these political processes be part of a unified system of the development towards the EU. So if the political process is a problem, which means that methodologically speaking, something is wrong. In the process, something is wrong. And I think we should address that. And one more thing I would just like to add. I really, was very, somehow emotional when I heard Chancellor Scholz, and he said Zeitenwende and this turn of the era in respect to the huge change in Europe that happened after February 24th. So I would really like to say that we shouldn't use this word just for everything. It shouldn't be an inflation of Zeitenwende also for the Western Balkans. If there is a really turn of the era for the Western Balkans, then it's not 3 agreements that we're going to sign tomorrow. This is something which was long overdue 2 years ago. And it's because of the political developments and political whatever, it didn't happen. This is good for the region, it's positive, but that's not Zeitenwende. So I don't really realize that there is something, that need to be done deeply into the process, into the methodology, how the process has been run so far, or just not to pretend it's a Zeitenwende for the region, it's not. And well, Serbia, Kosovo, I read some papers, it's positive, but don't forget, it's also can be positive for the region and negative for the region. The economic package that can support the agreement on normalization between Serbia and Kosovo should be also a regional package, because we are all interdependent. Just don't forget that.
Well, thank you, Nenad. We had a panel here today talking about corruption and good governance. And I think, as you were pointing out, together with the political will, we need to talk about an economic rule of law or economic good governance. So fighting corruption, not just for the sake of fighting corruption, but how to foster economic development. So maybe that's a linkage that we need to look. When I mentioned the Zeitenwende, is that I think it's time that the Western Balkans is not seen anymore as the backyard of the European Union in the framework of what's happening all around Europe, but it's the front yard when it comes to strategic competition too. So I think that's important. But I'll give the final floor to Silvana. I think we have about 1 minute to go.
2 minutes.
I would just point out that with regards to the human capital, we need more regional initiatives when it comes to the education, joint programs, research programs, or something. We need to bring the region closer to the young people. They somehow more relate themselves to the European Union, to the developed countries, than to the region. Making such initiatives would give new impetus to the region and would actually see the countries in a wider context, because we are small countries with so many problems all over the years. We do need to see each other, how we could function as a region, and also the possibilities that the region brings itself. And in that perspective, the region could actually be a place where the ideas for regional cooperation could come, but the European Union must be responsive, and we need to look for the initiatives that deliver results, not for the initiatives that last for 20, 30 years without any specific results, because the region is getting tired. People are getting tired, and they're going out of the countries. And without human capital, we could not count on the region that would join Europe, European Union, no matter when that would happen.
Well, thank you very much. I think it's all about the recognition that the countries are too small if they are fragmented. They lack capacities, both financial or human capital. So if countries will not get together, they will not be competitive, not just in the European market, but also bigger in the global market. So we had planned at the very beginning that we'll have a lot of time because we said that we're women, so we'll be short and we'll go to the points. But this has been a fascinating panel, a lot of good insights that hopefully, Alexander, you took some good notes and things that will be useful for your work. Thank you for supporting the region. Thank you, Nenad. Thank you, Pranvera, Jelica, Silvana. Thank you to all of you. And I apologize, I did a bad job as a moderator that did not allow time for questions and answers. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I like this, what Annelene